Hey guys, Goober here. Today we're taking a look at the HK USP45 Expert, or also known as the Mark 23 at home. I built this to be a competition gun, mostly just to see if I could, and I thought it would be a good experiment to see if shooting some competitions with the 45 would make me better when I switched back to 9mm. Kind of like using a weighted bat practicing baseball. The main part on here you'll notice that's new is the Aimpoint ACRO. This was installed by Wright Armory, and it's their I-dot optic cut, and they gave me a quote of 6 to 8 weeks, and it turned out being exactly 8 weeks. They have a very sophisticated and in-depth tracker that you can use to watch the status and progress of your optic cut. The quality is pretty impressive, especially the coating that they do. This is not a Cerakote finish, this is a QPQ black nitride. Very similar to the original HK finish on here. Most other companies doing this kind of work, such as Langdon Tactical, they'll use Cerakote instead. But if you use Wright Armory and do their I-dot conversion, then you'll get a better, more durable finish. I sent my optic in with my slide, so they were able to do a bore sight, and I haven't taken the optic off of the pistol, and it hasn't gotten loose or anything yet. The only issue I did have is the screw that's in the back is the screw that's in the rear iron sight eventually worked itself loose, and I had to manually tighten it myself. There's no thread lock or anything that they applied onto it, so I think putting some blue Loctite on that, I should never have any problems again. The other upgrade that I did is I installed the LEM Trigger. The HK LEM Trigger is not a traditional double action, single action trigger, nor is it anywhere similar to a single action only or a double action only. The best way I think to explain it is it's kind of like a striker fired gun, but with a hammer. The hammer is bobbed and cannot be cocked, even if you manually pull it to the rear. The trigger will always have a long take up for the first shot. Then you get to a very crisp single action like wall. Once the wall breaks, you'll fire. The trigger reset is really short. And then you're back on that wall again. You can see the hammer is already cocked. This trigger upgrades the feel and makes it so that every trigger pull is consistent. You don't have that normal problem with double action, single action guns, where the first trigger pull is double action, and then subsequent pulls are single action, meaning you have to train for 2 different trigger pulls. With the LEM trigger, you always have the long take up, single action break. And with the Grayguns Precision Kit, you have a short reset. These triggers get a bad name because at gun shows and gun stores, when you pick this gun up, it's likely already been dry fired. And if you try to pull the trigger again after it's been dry fired, you'll get an extremely heavy double action trigger pull. But what you're actually experiencing is something that in normal operation of the pistol, you should never. This is a second strike capability where you can pull the trigger again and it'll fire, but you get a really long, awful trigger pull. However, if you cock the gun, then you'll actually be able to experience the true magic of the LEM trigger. And because when you reload your first round, you're going to have to run the slide, every trigger pull subsequent to this will be that nice single action, unless you have a malfunction or you want to do a second strike. So if you tried this trigger at a gun show or at your local gun shop, you might have gotten the wrong impression from it the first time. And I would implore you to give it a second chance, because I think this is the superior trigger system. You get the benefits of a hammer and the consistency of a striker-fired gun. The next upgrade I did was to the magazines. This is the HK Parts plus 10 extension. It takes your magazine from being 12 rounds only to having 21 or 22 rounds total. Unfortunately, the mounting hardware here, which is supposed to engage on the bottom of the magazine, is loose. This side doesn't do it. This side is engaged though, so it's not going to disassemble spontaneously on me. It is still disconcerting to only have one of the sides be engaged though. I think this is a manufacturing defect, tolerance issue from the HK parts. If you load these to 22 rounds, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting it to insert on a closed bolt. There were a few times at the matches that actually screwed with me and the magazine fell out because I didn't hit it hard enough when I inserted it into the pistol. The other issue I've had with these magazines is that they do not reliably lock open on the last round fired. Unfortunately, there's not really any other option for extended magazines for your USP45, so these HK parts ones are the only ones that you'll actually be able to really get. If anybody knows of a alternative extension that works a little better, let me know in the comments. On the end, I have a Ferroch compensator. This is their Vanguard compensator. This was the only compensator that I was able to find readily available that would work. That was a barrel-mounted compensator for the USP45. I'm using a Jarvis 45 ACP threaded barrel. Unfortunately, the way this thing tensions on is there's a screw in the bottom here that you're supposed to tighten so that this doesn't back off and spin into a weird direction. However, after every single match, I've pretty much found that this thing has worked itself slightly loose and is slightly out of alignment. Although I've never had any catastrophic malfunctions and it's never failed me during any of the matches. On a standard USP45, there's not a gap like this here. This is specifically because it's a USP Expert. So it's got this slightly longer barrel and this slightly longer geometry on the front here. With a normal USP45 slide, these blend in perfectly. In order to get the slide to function reliably with the compensator installed, I had to downgrade the factory standard 14-pound recoil spring to the 12-pound version. Thankfully, you can buy these springs on Wolff springs. However, it is an extreme pain in the ass to install onto the recoil spring guide. This is another one. And if you look on the top here, if I can get it to focus. This clip here is not like a traditional spring clip. It is extremely annoying to get off, and I assume that HK probably has a specific tool that you can use to take this on and off. But unlike many normal C-clips, it's actually bent the opposite way, making it more difficult to disassemble. And this is the spring that you would want to change, the big one. The little one is even more of a pain in the ass to get off. Do not disassemble it to that point. Only this spring here on the outside is the one that you're going to want to change. The 12-pound spring works perfectly with the compensator and also with the lighter powered frangible loads that I'm using at those indoor matches that you see in the shorts. The last thing on here is the GG&G adapter and the Surefire X300 Turbo that I've got on here. The trigger guard for the USP45 is gigantic, so it pushes your flashlight forward quite a bit. So I also bought the Emissary Development paddle shifter, which helps bring back the engagement point, and I'm able to actually hit it with my thumb, even though it's so much more far forward. And I would recommend this if you're going to try to run any kind of flashlight on your USP45. The GG&G adapter seems kind of janky putting it on, and I've heard of people having them come loose eventually. However, with all the hundreds of rounds that I put through this, I've never had any issues. It's still tight as it was when I put it on originally, and I don't think I used any kind of thread lock or anything. From the factory, the adapter and the paddle shifter will conflict with each other and will rub, so you need to take off some material from behind on the paddle shifter in order to make it clear the GG&G adapter. For competitions, you need a holster, and just like with my Beretta 92 that you guys saw in the last video that I did on a pistol, I'm using one of these custom-made holsters with the little retention strap that clicks up and down. The pistol is retained well enough. However, when you're doing some kind of two-gun or anything, you're going to definitely want to engage this retention strap because it is easy for the pistol to get pushed out of your holster. It won't fall out because there is enough tension to kind of hold it in. But if you have to throw a kettlebell or crawl on the ground or something, it's just peace of mind to have this strap over the top so you know that it can't come out of your holster. This kind of retention mechanism is extremely slow if you're shooting something like USPSA or a pistol-only competition. So for those, normally I just run with the hood forward. There are certain competitions which will force you to engage all safety features that you have on your holster, in which case, if I was going to be seriously competing with this gun for the future, I would invest in an alternative holster that didn't have this retention strap. However, nobody's been that big of a dick at any of the matches that I've taken this to so far. As you can see, the compensator is a little bit long for the holster, so it sticks out of the bottom. I did have to Dremel around the edges here because the holster material curled in there and wouldn't let the compensator pass through. But the holster has worked perfectly for me in all the matches that I've taken it to. So in closing, should you do this to your USP45 in order to make it into a competition beast? And the short answer is absolutely not. This is a fool's errand, especially with all the work that's required in order to change out one of these damn recoil springs. The only reason I did it was because, as my title suggests, I am a gun goober, and the sick curiosity would not let me go until I completed this monstrosity. There is no reason to shoot 45 ACP in a competition setting outside of extremely obscure race guns or trying to shoot in major caliber for some reason. The USP45, with its lack of extended magazines and outdated rail interface, is not a gun that you would want to start with as a base for your competition needs. However, if you're a gun goober like me and you just have to find out for yourself, I hope this video has helped you to track down all the little parts and you have slightly less of a frustrating time than I did putting one together. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. Thanks for watching.